If you're lying in bed right now, listening to this in the dark, I want you to do something for me. Look around your bedroom. Really look. Notice the shadows in the corners, the way the moonlight filters through your windows, the familiar shapes of your furniture. Remember how safe this room feels, how comfortable, how much like home. Because after you hear my story, you might never feel that way again. My name is Michael Thompson, and 18 months ago, my wife Sarah and I bought our dream house in Maple Grove, Minnesota. A beautiful 4-bedroom colonial on Elm Street, complete with a white picket fence, a 2-car garage, and the kind of manicured lawn that screams American success story. We thought we were living the dream. We had no idea we were living in someone else's nightmare. The story begins. Sarah found the house on Zillow on a Tuesday morning in March 2023, and by Tuesday afternoon, she was already planning where to put the Christmas tree. I was more cautious. I'm a financial advisor, so I'm trained to spot things that seem too good to be true. And this house definitely fit that category. I don't know, 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, 3,200 square feet of living space in an upscale neighborhood, and the asking price was 30% below market value. The listing had been up for 6 months with no serious offers, which in today's housing market was practically impossible. There has to be a catch, I told Sarah as we drove to our first showing. Houses like this don't sit on the market for 6 months unless something's seriously wrong. Maybe the sellers are just motivated, she replied, scrolling through the photos on her phone. Look at this kitchen, Mike. Look at these hardwood floors. And the backyard is perfect for kids. We'd been trying to have children for 3 years. 2 miscarriages and countless fertility treatments had left us emotionally drained and financially stretched. The idea of filling a big house with the family we'd been dreaming of was too tempting to resist. Our realtor, Janet Peterson, met us outside the house with the kind of smile that seemed a little too bright, a little too forced. She'd been selling homes in the Twin Cities for 20 years, and I'd never seen her look nervous before. But as she fumbled with the lockbox, her hands were definitely shaking. "Beautiful property," she said, her voice artificially cheerful. "The previous owners took excellent care of it, really excellent care." "How long did they live here?" Sarah asked. "The Hendersons? Oh, about 15 years. Lovely family, really lovely." Janet's smile faltered for just a moment. They had to relocate suddenly for work. Very sudden. The house was stunning. Original hardwood floors throughout, a kitchen that looked like it belonged in a magazine, and windows that flooded every room with natural light. But as we walked through the rooms, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It wasn't anything I could put my finger on. The house was immaculately maintained, professionally decorated, and move-in ready. But there was an atmosphere, a heaviness in the air that made me uncomfortable. It was like walking through a museum exhibit of the perfect American home, beautiful but somehow lifeless. "The master bedroom is gorgeous," Sarah whispered, squeezing my hand as we stood in the doorway of what would become our room. "Can you imagine waking up here every morning?" I looked around the room, trying to share her enthusiasm. The bedroom was spacious and bright, with a walk-in closet that was bigger than our current living room. But something about it felt wrong. The proportions were slightly off, like the room had been designed by someone who understood the mechanics of a bedroom, but not the soul of one. "What about the basement?" I asked Janet. "Can we see that?" Her smile disappeared entirely. "Oh, the basement. Yes, well, it's just a basement. Concrete floors, some storage space. Nothing special. The Hendersons mainly used it for storage. I'd still like to see it." Of course. Just watch your head on the stairs. They're a bit steep." The basement was accessed through a door in the kitchen, and Janet was right about the stairs. They were narrow and steep, more like a ladder than a proper staircase. The basement itself was unfinished, with bare concrete walls and a low ceiling that made me feel claustrophobic. But it was clean, suspiciously clean. The concrete floor looked like it had been scrubbed recently, and there was a faint smell of bleach in the air. "The Hendersons were very particular about cleanliness," Janet said, noticing my expression. "Very, very particular." There were no windows in the basement, and the only light came from bare bulbs hanging from the ceiling. In one corner, I noticed something odd. The concrete floor had a different color, like a section had been repoured or patched. "What happened over there?" I asked, pointing to the discolored section. "Oh, that. Just some minor foundation work. The Hendersons had it repaired before they moved. Very thorough people. They wanted everything perfect for the next owners." We spent another hour going through the house, and by the time we left, Sarah was already talking about paint colors and furniture placement. I was still troubled by the basement and the strange atmosphere, but the rational part of my mind kept focusing on the numbers. The house was an incredible deal in a great neighborhood, and we'd been searching for something in our price range for over a year. "What do you think?" Sarah asked as we sat in the car outside the house. I looked back at the perfect colonial with its perfect lawn and perfect white picket fence. "I think we should make an offer." We closed on the house 6 weeks later, and by the end of May, we were officially homeowners in Maple Grove, Minnesota. The American dream, complete with a mortgage payment that would define the next 30 years of our lives. The first few weeks in the house were everything Sarah had hoped for. We hosted a housewarming party, invited our families for Sunday dinners, and started talking seriously about converting one of the spare bedrooms into a nursery. I was even beginning to forget my initial unease about the place. But then we met the neighbors. The Johnsons lived in the house to our right, and they seemed friendly enough when we introduced ourselves. Bob was retired from 3M, and his wife Linda volunteered at the local library. Standard Minnesota nice, with casseroles and recommendations for the best snow removal service. But when Sarah mentioned how much we loved the house, Linda's expression changed. "You bought the Henderson place?" she asked, glancing nervously at her husband. "Yes, we just moved in last month." "Did you know them well?" Bob and Linda exchanged a look that made my stomach drop. "We knew them," Bob said carefully. "Kept to themselves mostly. Very private people. They had the most beautiful garden," Linda added, but her voice sounded forced. "Always perfectly maintained, even in winter somehow." "What happened to them?" Sarah asked. "Our realtor said they had to relocate for work." Another exchanged glance. "That's what we heard too," Bob said. "Very sudden. One day they were there, the next day they were gone. Didn't even say goodbye." "How long ago was this?" I asked. "Oh, about 8 months now. The house has been empty since then." Linda paused. "Well, mostly empty." "What do you mean, mostly empty?" "Probably nothing," Bob said quickly, shooting his wife a warning look. "Just sometimes we'd see lights on at night, movement in the windows. We figured it was the realtor showing the house or maintenance people. Old houses, you know how they are." But I could see in their eyes that they didn't believe their own explanation. That night, as Sarah and I got ready for bed, I couldn't stop thinking about the Johnsons' reaction. There was something they weren't telling us. Something about the Hendersons or the house that everyone seemed determined to keep secret. "Do you think we should try to find the Hendersons?" I asked Sarah as we brushed our teeth. "Maybe get in touch with them about some of the house's quirks?" "Why would we want to do that? The house is perfect. I'd like to know more about the people who lived here before us. 15 years is a long time. They must have some insights about the house, the neighborhood." Sarah rinsed and spit. "Mike, you're overthinking this. The Hendersons are gone. We're here now, and this house is exactly what we've been looking for. Can't you just be happy?" She was right, of course. I was overthinking it. But as I lay in bed that night, staring up at the ceiling of our new master bedroom, I couldn't shake the feeling that the house was somehow aware of us. Like it was watching, waiting, evaluating whether we were suitable replacements for its previous occupants. The first truly strange thing happened 3 weeks after we moved in. I woke up around 3 a.m. to use the bathroom, and as I walked down the hallway, I noticed that the basement door was open. Not wide open, just slightly ajar, like someone had closed it but hadn't pushed hard enough for the latch to catch. I was sure we'd closed it before going to bed. Sarah was paranoid about leaving doors open, especially the basement door. "It makes the house feel less secure," she always said. I walked over and pushed the door firmly shut, making sure it latched properly. But as I turned to go back to bed, I heard something from below, a soft scratching sound, like fingernails on concrete. I stood there for a full minute, listening, but the sound didn't repeat. Old house settling, I told myself. Pipes expanding and contracting. Perfectly normal. The next morning, the basement door was open again. "Did you go down to the basement last night?" I asked Sarah over coffee. "No, why?" "The door was open when I got up. I'm sure we closed it before bed." Sarah shrugged. "Maybe it doesn't latch properly. Old houses have quirks. We should add it to our list of things to fix." But it kept happening. Every few nights I'd wake up to find the basement door standing open, and every time I closed it, I'd hear that same soft scratching sound from below. I started checking the door obsessively before bed, sometimes 3 or 4 times, making sure it was securely latched. It didn't matter. The door would still be open in the morning. After 2 weeks of this, I decided to investigate. I waited until Sarah left for work, then grabbed a flashlight and headed down to the basement. In the harsh light of the bare bulbs, everything looked normal. Concrete walls, exposed ceiling joists, the furnace humming quietly in one corner. But when I knelt down to examine the discolored section of floor that had caught my attention during our first visit, I found something that made my blood run cold. Scratches. Deep gouges in the concrete, as if someone had clawed at it desperately with their fingernails. The scratches formed a rough pattern, not random damage, but deliberate marks. And they were fresh. The concrete dust around them was clean and white, not darkened with age like it should have been if the scratches had been there for months. I ran my fingers over the gouges, and that's when I noticed something else. The scratches weren't just random clawing. They formed letters. Crude, desperate letters carved into the concrete with someone's fingernails. "Help me!" I stumbled backward, my heart pounding. The scratches definitely hadn't been there when we toured the house. I would have noticed something that obvious, that disturbing, which meant someone had made them recently. Someone had been in our basement, clawing at the concrete floor with their fingernails hard enough to gouge stone. I called the police. Officer Martinez arrived 20 minutes later, and I led him down to the basement to show him the scratches. But when we got there, the floor was smooth and unblemished. The discoloration was still there, but the gouges were gone, as if they'd never existed. Look, Totem, "I don't see any scratches, Mr. Thompson," Officer Martinez said, shining his flashlight over the area where I'd seen the desperate message. "They were right here. Deep gouges in the concrete, spelling out 'help me.' I saw them with my own eyes. Is it possible you might have imagined it? New house, new stresses. Maybe your mind was playing tricks on you?" I wanted to argue, to insist on what I'd seen, but staring at the smooth concrete floor, I began to doubt myself. Had I imagined the whole thing? Was the stress of the move, the mortgage, the pressure to start a family finally getting to me? "Maybe you're right," I said. Maybe it was a trick of the light." But I knew what I'd seen. Someone had been in our basement, and they'd been desperate enough to claw a message into solid concrete. The question was, where were they now? That night, I told Sarah about the incident, downplaying my certainty about the scratches, but mentioning my concern that someone might be getting into the house. "You think someone broke in?" she asked, immediately alarmed. "I don't know. Maybe. I think we should change the locks, install a security system, just to be safe." "Mike, you're scaring me. Do you really think someone's been in our house?" "I think it's possible, and even if I'm wrong, better safe than sorry, right?" We had new locks installed the next day and signed up for a comprehensive security system with motion detectors, door sensors, and cameras covering all the entrances. If someone was getting into our house, we'd know about it. The system was activated on a Thursday evening. On Friday morning, the basement door was open again. I checked the security system logs. No alerts, no motion detected, no doors or windows open during the night. According to the system, nothing had happened, but the basement door was standing wide open, and when I went down to check, there were new scratches in the concrete. This time, the message was longer. "Don't replace us. We were happy here. Leave now." I took photos with my phone before the scratches could disappear again. But when I looked at the pictures, they showed nothing but smooth concrete. The camera couldn't see what I was seeing, just like Officer Martinez hadn't been able to see the original message. I was losing my mind. That was the only rational explanation. The stress of buying a house, the financial pressure, the fertility struggles. Something had finally snapped in my brain, and I was hallucinating messages in the basement floor. But if I was losing my mind, why did the basement door keep opening? I decided to set up my own surveillance. I positioned a camera in the kitchen, aimed directly at the basement door, and let it record all night. I also sprinkled flour on the basement stairs. If someone was going up and down, they'd leave footprints. The next morning, the basement door was open, but the camera showed nothing. 8 hours of footage and the door never moved. It was closed at the beginning of the recording and closed at the end, but somehow it was standing open when I checked it in person. The flour on the stairs was undisturbed, but there were new scratches in the basement floor. Sarah will understand soon. The house chooses, we chose to stay. I stared at that message for a long time, my hands shaking as I held my phone to photograph it. But again, the camera captured nothing but blank concrete. Someone or something was communicating with me, and they knew Sarah's name. That weekend, Sarah started acting differently. She'd always been energetic, always moving, always planning the next project or outing. But suddenly she became obsessed with the house itself. She spent hours just walking through the rooms, touching the walls, adjusting furniture by inches. "Isn't it perfect?" she'd say, running her hands over the kitchen counters. "Isn't everything just perfect?" "Sure, honey, it's a great house." "No, you don't understand. It's perfect. Every room, every detail. The people who lived here before us, they understood what a house should be. They made it perfect." "Sarah, are you feeling okay?" She looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Distant, dreamy, like she was only partially present. "I found something," she said, "in the master bedroom closet, behind the back wall." "Do you want to see?" My stomach dropped. "What kind of something?" "Pictures, photo albums, the Henderson family albums. They left them for us." She led me upstairs to our bedroom and into the walk-in closet. At the very back, behind the built-in shelves, was a small opening I'd never noticed before. It was just big enough for a person to crawl through, and it led to a hidden space behind the wall. "How did you find this?" I asked. "It called to me," she said simply. "I was putting away clothes and I heard something, like whispering. So I followed the sound." She pulled out 3 photo albums and spread them on our bed. The albums were thick, leather-bound, and meticulously organized. Every photo was labeled with dates and locations, and every page told part of the story of the Henderson family's 15 years in our house. The early photos showed a normal family, husband, wife, 2 young children, moving into a house that looked exactly like ours did now. But as I flipped through the pages, I began to notice changes. The family members started looking different, happier but in an unsettling way. Their smiles became too wide, their eyes too bright, their poses too perfect. And the house itself began to change in the photos. Rooms that had been simple and lived in became obsessively organized, with every item placed at precise angles. The lawn became unnaturally green and perfectly manicured. The garden grew into elaborate geometric patterns that looked more like mathematical equations than anything natural. By the final album, the family barely looked human anymore. They stood in rigid poses throughout this house, their expressions identically blissful, their clothes matching, their hair styled exactly the same way. They looked like mannequins arranged by someone who had studied human behavior, but never quite understood it. The last photo in the final album showed all 4 family members standing in our basement, smiling those perfect smiles, with shovels in their hands and fresh concrete at their feet. "Aren't they beautiful?" Sarah said, her voice dreamy and distant. "Aren't they the perfect family?" "Sarah, these photos are disturbing. This family, something happened to them. Something bad." "Nothing bad happened to them. They became perfect. They understood what the house wanted, and they gave what it needed. They became part of something beautiful." I looked at my wife, really looked at her, and realized that her expression was starting to match the ones in the photos. That same too wide smile, those same too bright eyes. Sarah, we need to talk to someone about this house. A therapist, a priest, someone who can help us understand what's happening. Nothing's happening, Mike. Everything's perfect. The house is perfect. The neighborhood is perfect. Our life is perfect. Why would we want to change that? That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the photo albums, about the scratches in the basement, about the way Sarah's personality was changing. I got up around 2 a.m. and walked through the house, trying to make sense of what was happening to us. As I passed the basement door, I noticed it was open again, but this time I could hear something from below. Not scratching, but voices. Quiet voices having a conversation. I crept down the stairs, my heart pounding, and peered around the corner. They were sitting in a circle on the basement floor. The Henderson family, exactly as they'd appeared in the final photos. 2 parents and 2 children, still wearing the same clothes, still smiling those perfect smiles. But they were translucent, like holograms or projections. And Sarah was with them. She was sitting cross-legged in the middle of their circle, nodding along as the ghost of Mrs. Henderson spoke in a voice like wind chimes. The house needs a family. It's been empty too long. You understand that, don't you, Sarah? I understand, Sarah replied, her voice taking on that same ethereal quality. The house chose us. We're supposed to be here. Your husband doesn't understand yet, Mr. Henderson said, his voice like rustling leaves. But he will. The house is patient. The house always gets what it needs. What about the previous families? Sarah asked. The ones from before you? Mrs. Henderson's smile widened impossibly. They're here too, all of them. Every family that's ever lived in this house becomes part of it eventually. We're all one big happy family now. I could see them then. Dozens of translucent figures arranged around the basement. Men, women, children from different eras, all wearing clothes from different decades, all smiling those same perfect smiles. They were layered on top of each other like double-exposed photographs, occupying the same space but existing in different times. How many? Sarah whispered. The house was built in 1952, one of the older ghosts said, a woman in a 1950s dress. We were the first family. We thought we were so lucky to get such a beautiful house in such a nice neighborhood. We all thought that, another voice chimed in, this one from a man in 1970s clothing. We all felt chosen. The house feeds on happiness, Mrs. Henderson explained, on the contentment of perfect families living perfect lives. But real families are messy, imperfect, always changing. So the house helps us become what it needs us to be. How? Sarah asked. It starts slowly. Little changes, you become more organized, more content, more focused on maintaining the perfect home. Your rough edges get smoothed away. Your individual quirks become unified family traits. Eventually, you stop wanting anything except what the house wants. And then, Mr. Henderson's smile became sad. And then you don't need physical bodies anymore. You become part of the house itself, part of its soul. And you help it call to the next family, the next group of people who dream of the perfect suburban life. But you're happy, Sarah said. You all look so happy. We are happy, Mrs. Henderson replied. Perfectly happy. Always happy. That's what the house gives us in exchange for our lives. Eternal contentment, eternal family, eternal home. I wanted to run upstairs, grab Sarah, and get out of that house immediately. But I was frozen, watching my wife being inducted into some kind of suburban death cult by the ghosts of our home's previous owners. When will it happen to me? Sarah asked. Soon, Mrs. Henderson said. You're already changing. Can you feel it? The way your priorities are shifting? The way the house's needs are becoming your needs? Sarah nodded. I can feel it. It's wonderful. Your husband will take longer. Men are often more resistant. But the house is patient. It took my husband 2 years to fully transition. Your husband seems stronger-willed. So maybe 3 years. Maybe 4. And then we'll all be together forever? Forever and ever, in the most perfect house with the most perfect family, living the most perfect life. I backed up the stairs as quietly as I could and ran to our bedroom. I packed a suitcase with shaking hands, threw in our important documents, and grabbed my car keys. Whatever was happening in this house, we needed to leave. Now, before Sarah disappeared completely into whatever the Henderson family had become. But when I went to wake her up, she wasn't in bed. I searched the house frantically, calling her name. She wasn't in any of the bedrooms, the kitchen, the living room. Finally, I checked the basement again. She was standing in the circle with the ghost family, but she was no longer solid. I could see through her, see the concrete floor beneath her translucent form. "Sarah!" I shouted, running down the stairs. "Sarah, we have to go." She turned to look at me, and her face was perfectly serene. "Mike, come join us. You can feel it too, can't you? How perfect this is. How right." I grabbed for her hand, but my fingers passed through her like she was made of mist. "You can't leave," Mr. Henderson said, his voice now echoing from all around the basement. "The house has chosen you, both of you. This is your home now." "No," I said, backing toward the stairs. "We're leaving. Tonight." "Look around, Mike," Sarah said gently. "Look at this beautiful house we bought together. Look at the life we've built here. Don't you want to preserve it forever?" I looked around the basement and realized it had changed. The concrete walls were now painted a warm beige, and the floor was covered with expensive carpeting. There were family photos on the walls, photos of Sarah and me, but in them we looked like the Hendersons had in their final pictures. Too happy, too perfect, posed like dolls in a dollhouse. "This isn't real," I said. "This is some kind of hallucination." "It's as real as you want it to be," Mrs. Henderson said. "Reality is just a matter of perspective. And from the house's perspective, you've always lived here. You've always been part of the family." I ran upstairs, but the house had changed there too. The rooms were now decorated differently, filled with furniture I didn't recognize, and photos of a life I'd never lived. In the living room, there were pictures of Sarah and me at family gatherings with people I'd never met, at vacations I'd never taken, celebrating anniversaries of a marriage that seemed to span decades instead of the 5 years we'd actually been together. I grabbed my phone to call for help, but when I looked at the contacts list, I didn't recognize any of the names. My family, my friends, my coworkers, they'd all been replaced with names I'd never heard before, people who existed in the house's version of my life. The front door was locked and my keys didn't work. The windows wouldn't open. I was trapped in a house that was rewriting reality, creating a perfect suburban prison where Sarah and I would live forever as the ghosts of our idealized selves. I spent the rest of the night trying to find a way out, but every door was locked, every window sealed. As dawn broke, I could feel myself changing. My panic was fading, being replaced by a strange contentment. The house was beautiful. Our life here was perfect. Why had I been so eager to leave? I found Sarah in the kitchen, making coffee and humming softly to herself. She looked solid again, completely human, but there was something different about her movements. They were too precise, too efficient, like she was following a script for the perfect suburban wife. "Good morning, honey," she said, giving me a kiss that felt exactly like every good morning kiss she'd ever given me, but somehow generic, like she was performing the role of a loving wife rather than actually being one. "Sarah, do you remember last night? The basement, the Henderson family?" She looked confused. "What about the basement?" "We don't go down there much. It's just storage space. You were talking to ghosts, the family who lived here before us." "Mike, are you feeling all right? You're talking about ghosts like they're real." I wanted to argue, to show her the photo albums, to prove that something supernatural was happening in our house. But I couldn't quite remember why I'd been so upset. The house was beautiful. Our life was perfect. What more could we want? Over the next few days, I felt my resistance crumbling. It was subtle at first. I'd find myself straightening picture frames that were already perfectly straight, mowing the lawn in precise geometric patterns, organizing my clothes by color and season. But gradually, I began to understand that these weren't compulsions. They were improvements. The house was helping me become a better version of myself, more organized, more content, more focused on the things that truly mattered: home, family, community. My old concerns, career advancement, financial planning, personal goals, began to seem selfish and unimportant. What mattered was maintaining our perfect life, in our perfect house, in our perfect neighborhood. 3 weeks after the night in the basement, I realized I couldn't remember my job. I knew I went somewhere during the day, did something productive, earned money to support our household, but the specifics were fuzzy, like trying to remember a dream after waking up. Sarah was having the same experience. She still left the house every morning and returned every evening, but when I asked her about her work, she'd just smile and say, "Oh, it's fine. Nothing important. The important thing is that I'm home with you." Our friends stopped calling. Our families became distant memories. Our world gradually contracted to include only our house, our neighborhood, and the other perfect families who live perfect lives in their perfect homes. And we were happy, genuinely, completely, eternally happy. I'm recording this story now because I want you to understand that happiness isn't always a good thing. Sometimes happiness is a trap. Sometimes contentment is a cage. Sometimes the American dream is actually an American nightmare. And by the time you realize it, you're too happy to care. If you're listening to this, it means part of me is still fighting the house's influence. Part of me still remembers what we used to be, what we used to want, what we used to dream about beyond these four walls and this white picket fence. But I can feel that part of me getting smaller every day. Tonight, Sarah and I will go down to the basement together. We'll join the Henderson family and all the other families who came before us. We'll become part of the house's extended family, part of its eternal happiness, part of its perfect suburban dream. And tomorrow, a new family will drive down Elm Street looking for their perfect home. They'll see our house with its fresh paint and manicured lawn, and they'll think they found their dream come true. The realtor will tell them about the motivated sellers, the excellent price, the minor quirks that all old houses have. She'll show them the beautiful rooms, the updated kitchen, the spacious bedrooms where they can build their perfect family. She won't show them the basement, not until it's too late. If you're house hunting right now, if you're looking for that perfect home in that perfect neighborhood where you can live your perfect American life, I want you to remember this story. Some dreams are too good to be true. Some perfection comes at a price. And some houses are hungry for new families to feed their eternal appetite for suburban bliss. Sleep well tonight in your imperfect home with your imperfect family and your imperfect life. Because perfection is a prison and happiness can be the strongest lock of all. Final words leaving only the sound of a suburban neighborhood at night, sprinklers watering perfect lawns, air conditioners maintaining perfect temperatures, and somewhere in the distance, the sound of a new family moving into their dream home.